Good morning, everyone. I thank you so much for joining us. It's Coffee with Akila, and today we're here to talk about a serious topic, elder abuse. I'm the Executive Director of the Pasadena Senior Center, and Miles McNeeley is joining me. I will introduce him formally in just a few minutes. But many of you might be asking, why are we talking about elder abuse awareness today? Well, today is a special day that is set aside every year to talk about the plight of older adults, not only in our community, but across the world. Every day, an older adult is abused. And so we want to educate you about elder abuse and want you to find out what you can do to help prevent elder abuse and recognize it. At the end of our talk, we're going to pause for about 10 or 15 minutes, and we will be taking questions in the chat. We have an audience here today, and we will be taking questions from them also. Sadly, and we'll talk about this with Miles, elder abuse is drastically underreported, and that's what we want to help everyone here today, is to recognize it and report it to help the older adults in our community. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here this morning to have this conversation on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, also known as WEAD.
So let me tell you a little bit about him. He knows a lot about elder abuse. He is a licensed clinical social worker and is the director of elder abuse prevention at Wise and Healthy Family Aging, which is a nonprofit agency serving older adults in Los Angeles and San Bernardino County. He manages educational and advocacy campaigns throughout Los Angeles County, tasked to promote elder justice and prevent abuse. Mr. McNeeley leads the holistic elder abuse response team, and we'll learn a little bit more about that today. Individual counseling, support groups, legal advocacy, and crisis intervention to older adults experiencing mistreatment. So I am delighted that he's here. You can't get any better of an expert than him to talk to us today about elder abuse. So now I think the first question I need to ask so that people can understand is, what is elder abuse?
Yeah, sure, of course. So elder abuse is really defined and broken down into different categories, different forms of abuse. So there's emotional abuse slash verbal abuse, and what that may look like are things that you can usually observe in a relationship, such as witnessing a caregiver or someone that's close to the elder speaking in demeaning language, using insults or verbal assaults toward the elder. So that's the first category. There's also physical abuse, which are things that you might commonly think of when you think of physical abuse, like hitting or pushing or pinching. There may be, when we think about caregiver dynamics, things like restraining someone where there's possibly a wandering situation. The caregiver isn't sure how to keep the person they're giving care for safe and in the home, and they might be using restraints. That would be a form of physical abuse. There's financial abuse, and when I think of financial abuse, there's oftentimes two different arms of that category. There's the kind of the intimate relationship where someone is accessing the elder's wallet, their checkbook, they might be moving around assets. And then there's what I think everyone is seeing so much every day, and everyone is seeing this, is scam activity, right? We're getting these phone calls, these emails. So that's really exploded in the past 5 years. Year after year, we've seen increasing scam activity. Then we have neglect, which also includes self-neglect. So an example of that would be a caregiver isn't following through with really the requirements of being a caregiver and making sure that someone that might need support in their life, they're not providing that support. And then there's self-neglect, where you have someone that may be living alone, doesn't have care, and we're seeing signs that they're not able to care for themselves in a way that's going to keep them healthy or housed.
I think self-neglect is one of the hardest ones to help or to prevent, because I've seen it here at the senior center a lot, where you'll have an older adult that comes in and you know that they need help, but they refuse help. And legally, as long as they refuse help, there really isn't anything you can do about it. Can that sort of thing be reported?
Yeah, that's and I'm in agreement with you on that. It can be really difficult to think of the right way to support someone that's experiencing self-neglect. Yes, that can be reported. So it's something that we recommend, and the idea is that when we are noticing signs of self-neglect, that we can submit that report. And really the first thing that's going to happen after a report is assigned to a social worker from the county is that they're going to assess the needs of the person. They're going to have a conversation and see if there's anything that they can do, any resources that they're aware of to support that person in that situation. And I think I'll be talking a little bit more throughout our talk today about how elder abuse services, or also known as adult protective services, may respond to these kinds of cases. But it really is primarily coming from a place of how can I support this individual? We're not trying to be punitive. Those moments we're trying to think of ideas for support.
So, is there a particular personality of an elder that is more vulnerable for elder abuse?
So what we see in some cases, and this isn't true for everyone, but there are some theoretical models or some risk factors that we look at that revolve around trauma. And I think trauma is something that we're, as a larger society, starting to talk more about. And when I say trauma, I'm often talking about the kind of life events, these adverse life events that might revolve around having really stressful moments, violent moments. And we see that there is or it looks like there's a connection in some cases for people that are having early childhood trauma, and how that can be associated with more trauma throughout the lifespan, including in older age.
Well, that's interesting. So is it the abuser that has more trauma, or is it the victim that has more trauma?
That's a really, really great question. And I believe that there is some research that's looked at both parties, but there hasn't been as much research looking at the abusive party in terms of what their trauma experience has been. I think that there's some movement now, because that's been a question that people have been asking more and more often, is that the case with the abusive person as well? And I think the thought is, the theory is that probably is true, but we don't have that, I don't think we have that research just yet.
Many years ago, I worked at the Alzheimer's Association, and we have this here also, caregiver support. And I know around Alzheimer's, caregivers, particularly if they are relatives, get so stressed out, and that's why it's so important for them to take a break. A lot of times people with Alzheimer's have repetitive behavior, repetitive questions that the caregiver has reported that I'm going out of my mind. How many times do I have to answer the same question? Are you seeing abuse more with Alzheimer's patients than in other situations with older adults?
Yeah, I can speak to that caregiver stress really it can lead to increased risk of abuse. And whenever those stressors are increased, which can be the case when we're caring for someone with a higher level of care needs, what we saw during the pandemic was that we did see that when we saw this increase in elder abuse cases, that one of the factors involved had to do with caregiver stress, and also had to do with the financial stress of what was happening with the family in relation to what was happening with the economy around COVID. So, as we saw people not working and really stressed out about finances and struggling with that, there seemed to be a connection there with that increased experience of elder abuse.
When you talk about elder abuse, and I guess I asked you this earlier, but is there a particular personality or situation that can cause it more than other situations? And the other question I want to ask, where does this take place? I think most people think that it just takes place in a home, and they don't realize that it takes place in daycare centers, in hospitals sometimes, in nursing homes, and other places that provide care for older adults. So I know I've given you like a lot to talk about.
No, that's good, and I'm really happy you re-asked that question, because I did miss a really huge part of that answer, which is that really anyone can be a victim of elder abuse, right? I think that's a really important takeaway, because we do see that there's shame or embarrassment where people, there might be some stigma around it, and we really do want to be really clear that anybody can be a victim. So I think so thank you for bringing that question up again. As far as the settings where abuse takes place, and it's a really important question, because it also has to do with how we respond to abuse and how we might be offering services to older adults affected by abuse. It can take place in any setting. It can take place for someone living in their home or at a care facility. Sometimes when we think about elder abuse, we naturally want to compare it to child abuse, but there's a lot of significant differences. And one of those differences is who typically responds to a report of elder abuse, where it depends on the setting. So if they're living in their home, it's going to be adult protective services. And if the person is living in a care facility, like a skilled nursing facility or an assisted living facility, then it's going to be the long-term care ombudsman program that goes out to the facility, speaks with the resident, and if consent is given to follow up with whatever the concern or the complaint is, then that ombudsman advocate will work with the resident as well as the facility to address those needs.
So let me ask you a question about facilities, because a lot of people don't understand what an ombudsman is. And if someone is being cared for, and the care is really expensive, and a lot of people think, oh, I'm paying a lot of money to have my mother or my father taken care of, or my aunt. I know they're not being abused in that setting. And so you go there and you don't think there's abuse, but maybe one day you'll see a bruise, or maybe one day, like when my mother was in a facility, I let her keep a ring because I felt like I had taken so much from her, closed down her house and sold off all of her possessions, and I felt really terrible about that. And she had a favorite ring that she loved, and I thought, I just can't take it from her. I just want her to have that. And so one day I went to visit her and it was gone. Now, I couldn't blame someone because maybe she lost it, but in that instance, what do you do? I mean, what do you do in a facility, and how does someone who is tasked, like care for, a parent or an older adult, how do you know who to ask? Most people have never heard of an ombudsman. And so where do you start with that? Or, because you can't talk to the facility because you think, okay, they're the ones that are doing it. So how does someone work their way through that?
Yes. So it varies from county to county in terms of who administers, who's running the long-term care ombudsman program. For Los Angeles County, it's Wise and Healthy Aging, which is the agency that I work with, as well as San Bernardino County. And so the first step is to call the ombudsman program, and you can go to wiseandhealthyaging.org to get that information, and to share your concern. And there's going to be an intake person that writes down the concern, and then the next step is that gets assigned to an ombudsman and advocate. Los Angeles County, I'm very proud to say, has one of the most professionalized ombudsman programs in the country. It was, for a very long time, the largest ombudsman program in the country. I think the state of Florida now has that because the state administers the whole state. Our ombudsman advocates, almost all of them have a master's degree in gerontology or social work, so they're very well trained, and they take these reports very seriously. So the person that's assigned the case will go out and investigate the allegation and will provide supportive services and try to resolve the issue, as long as either the resident or the person that has power of attorney for that resident is giving consent to do so.
So, we get a lot of calls here at the Senior Center, and people ask about different facilities. And of course, we can recommend places based on our personal knowledge, but maybe we should be telling people what to look for. I don't think anybody tells you what to look for. I know a lot, and when I placed my mother, and it was in Monterey, California, there wasn't anything posted. How do people even know that to be on the lookout for it, and where to place it? We're going to put something on our website about this, by the way, so that people will know about our ombudsman program here in our area. But most people don't even know that exists, and I'm wondering, is there a way to help family members who are tasked with placing their older adult in a facility, which is already heartbreaking enough to do. My mother had Alzheimer's and didn't even recognize me. So how do you educate the public about being more aware of facilities?
I think that there are some questions that a family member or someone or an older adult that's thinking about moving into a facility are going to want to ask. They might want to ask about the staffing ratio. They might want to take a few tours and maybe interviewing some of the residents there about their experiences. Some facilities will have a residents council where the residents are involved with activity and policy decisions, and I think that's a really good sign. Another good sign might be how many activities are being coordinated throughout the facility. It kind of gives you an indication. Is the facility kind of just surviving, or do they have enough support and infrastructure to provide a robust amount of social activities as well?
Now, in the home, it can get kind of tricky because the abuser is not going to report themselves, and sometimes family members don't recognize it. I'll give you an example. We had a woman that came here for a number of years, and her utilities were turned off, and so we had a program that would help people get their utilities turned back on. And so I had a talk with her in my office and found out that, I said, well, do you not have enough money? Or she says, oh, I've been keeping my lights on all my life, and for some reason, I've because my son now gets my Social Security check, all of a sudden I don't have enough money to keep the lights on. And every time I ask him, he just says we don't have enough money. And I did report that to Adult Protective Services, but it took a long time and a lot of talking to her to allow me to do that. And I think the hard thing for me is that her son was all she had. You know, he was there in the house with her, and what was going to happen to her after she was removed from the house? I mean, it turned out fine, and we helped her with that. But I guess the long way around this question is that how does it get reported when it's abuse in the home?
So when it's in the home, you would call a different number than the Ombudsman program. So again, for Los Angeles County, if you're on the internet, you can Google Los Angeles County Elder Abuse Hotline, and you can find the phone number there. And so that would be the first step, would be to call that number. And then there are some differences between how the Ombudsman program and how the County Adult Protective Services program works. But it's going to be a similar model where they're going to assign that concern, that report to a social worker, and they're going to go out and they're going to interview primarily the older adult. What does that interview look like? They want to do a very, very basic kind of like quick capacity assessment, just to see if this person is aware of the situation that's occurring. They're going to want to assess for any risks that might be occurring, whether it's the risk that's reported or other risks that the social worker is noticing. They're going to want to ask about the allegation of the abuse and get the perspective of the elder. And if the elder says, no, this isn't occurring, or these are false, or maybe yes, this is occurring, but I really don't want any support around this. Adult Protective Services uses a model of self-determination, meaning that really the older adult is the expert on their lives, and we have to respect that. So if the older adult either says, no, it's not happening, or yes, it is, but I really don't want your help, I'm going to figure this out on my own, then the person is respected as an adult, and the social worker is likely going to close that particular case. Now there are exceptions to that, which I think we can talk about a little bit further into our conversation about what we might do if there's some concerns around capacity.
Okay, so let me describe a case to you, and it's a case that I know a little bit about. A neighbor calls the police. The neighbor says, I haven't seen Mrs. So-and-so in a number of days, and the last couple of times I saw her, she looked extremely thin and unkept. And I'm not sure if there's even food in the house. So Adult Protective Services came out, and the house is a mess. It is, there's no food in the refrigerator. You can tell that the older adult hasn't been bathed in a number of days or weeks. She doesn't show any signs of physical trauma, but she's awfully thin. She's 5'5". She weighs about 98 pounds. So it's visible. The police say, oh, we're going to call Adult Protective Services. They come out. Now, in this case, neighbors knew the relatives, and a son was taking care of this particular woman, and he was frankly doing the best he could. He wasn't skilled at taking care of an older adult. And she was being fed pizza every night and hamburgers. Um, so in that instance, and I will tell you the ending of this story, they contacted some other family members. The family members stepped in and they took care. That's like the best case scenario. But what happened, and it was, oh yeah, and it was obvious that this older adult had dementia. Okay, so what is adult protective services in a situation like this? What is their responsibility to the older adult?
So I'm going to take a step back because there's something I really wanted to mention, and that is going back to this idea of underreporting. You know, a huge reason why we have underreporting is because of this idea that I'm going to get someone in trouble, or if I make this report, you know, their life's going to get turned upside down, and it's going to be all my fault. That's a lot of responsibility to carry. So just to reiterate that point, that primarily adult protective services, and you might be noticing that sometimes when I say that, I kind of hesitate because there's so much stigma around that, which is unfortunate because the idea of, you just think of the word protective. You know, think of protective by itself. It doesn't seem that scary, but you put it all together and it seems like this might be someone's going to get in trouble. But I really want people to walk away with the idea that really when we're submitting that report around elder safety or elder abuse, that really what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect this person with services. Another element to that is that the APS social worker that gets assigned to the case is very familiar with that specific community. So, for example, Pasadena may have 2 APS offices that cover the city, and then maybe a few other communities within that area. It's a very, the APS workers have a kind of a specific geography that they focus on. So they may know that the Pasadena Senior Center offers these programs, that they might have a specific knowledge of a local hospital. They might know some of the other elder service providers and have relationships with them. So they're able to kind of cater whatever they offer to the family or the elder based on the neighborhood and that specific community. And I think that's really important for people to know that it's not necessarily this blanket kind of response. So in this case, where it seems like there's this question of, because when we talk about self-determination, the assumption is that this person is making decisions consciously. That if they decide that they want to, not bathe, that's really a decision for them. That they understand the pros and cons of that decision and that process. If the APS social worker, based off of their very basic unofficial capacity assessment, has some evidence to show that there may not be capacity, cognitive capacity to make decisions, then the case may get escalated. And by escalated, that can mean different things. Sometimes it'll be submitted to the Elder Abuse Forensic Center, which is a multidisciplinary team that has attorneys, doctors, social workers from different organizations, both from the public as well as nonprofit. There's the Office of Public Guardian there, and there's people that specialize really in understanding. There's doctors that specialize in understanding how to really assess for capacity. And so in some of these more challenging cases where there's not always a right answer, there's gray area oftentimes. My recommendation for anyone that has these concerns is to consider whether or not this case might be a good fit for the Elder Abuse Forensic Center, because not only are there different perspectives in the room, and they're not always in agreement, right? Because there are some people that feel like people really should always have the right to make their own decisions, no matter what. And feel very strongly from the other side of that perspective, or from that topic. So have this multidisciplinary team of professionals that really understand these issues and can come to the table and really think about what resources are available and what can be done. And one outcome might be that the geriatrician that sits on that group says, well, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do a capacity assessment, and based off of what I find, this might be a case for the public guardian to get involved, or for a family to make a recommendation that a family member takes over as a conservator to ensure that the person is getting their basic needs met.
So is there ever a time that law enforcement or a family member comes in and they find someone in dire straits and that person is removed? And if that person is removed that day, where do they go?
So that's a really great question. I think for a few different reasons. Just to follow up the conversation about how a case like that might go into conservatorship or public guardianship. It really is it's a process. It's not something that just happens overnight. And I think that might give some people some comfort in reporting, knowing that likely someone's not just going to come in and apprehend, right? Yes, we're not kidnapping people. Now, if someone, the exception, there's exceptions, right? If someone's actively suicidal or homicidal, or I go into a home and someone's on the floor and they're not responsive, then I'm obviously going to call 911 and have paramedics involved. They're going to, they may get hospitalized, and the hospital might decide, I can't discharge this person back to their home because the supports aren't there. So that might lead to this person getting more medical and supportive services that they need. But with that, there's also cases where support workers, social worker goes into a home and they think that they're at that point. It's that dire, and we may call paramedics, we may call fire, and they come out, and the person is oriented enough to say, no, I refuse to go to the hospital. And it's the fire department's responsibility to follow that wish. And there's been times where they'll say, I can't take this person, that's kidnapping. So I feel like in this conversation, there's different reactions people might have. Some people might kind of think of that response as really concerning, like, oh, that's sad. This person is suffering.
You're leaving a person in danger.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
And then there's other people that are like, okay, good. I want to make sure that those rights, right, those civil rights are in place, where we can't just go into homes and just take people without having a process. So I understand there might be some different reactions as far as how those systems commonly work.
So the senior center is considered a mandated reporter, which means that if we see abuse, if we suspect it at all, by law, we are required to report it. So talk a little bit about other agencies that are considered mandated reporters.
Yeah, really, so anyone that works with an older adult in a professional capacity is a mandated reporter. And as you mentioned, the requirement is there to report the abuse. Social workers, medical professionals, professional caregivers, those are the roles that are in the state of California are required to report. And there's another piece to the kind of the bigger picture of definition of elder abuse that I wanted to talk a little bit about. Age is a common question, like what's considered an elder? So for a very, very long time, it was 65 and up. And California has recently received funding to expand APS services. So now,
his mic went up.
So, with increased funding, we're seeing more programming, and we're seeing more capacity. So now it's age 60 and up, and any adult 18
to me a little bit about your abuse response team. You mentioned it earlier. What is it? I don't think people even realize that it exists. So talk a little bit about that.
So I'll start with, this is such a good thing to bring up because it's bringing up other things that I think are important to share, that with adult protective services, we are seeing this increased funding, which is good because we have seen some gaps, and not just in California or LA, but just across the country, where, and it does, again, this can vary from county to county in terms of what resources are available, but commonly we see when the APS social worker goes out to respond to a case of abuse, they're doing the things I described earlier, but when it comes to providing the longer term support, they're working with the organizations and the services that are available in the community to support the elder. So the capacity isn't necessarily there to take on someone else, like onto my caseload as an APS worker. So there can be sometimes some gaps in what's available, or sometimes somebody may need to get referred to 3 different service providers. Maybe they need a restraining order, so they're getting referred to a legal agency that does that kind of work. Maybe they also want counseling. You know, they want some support in this whole process and trying to understand, everything that's coming up for them emotionally in the process. So they refer to another agency for the counseling. And then they get to refer to a third place for case management, right? So we see that sometimes things can be a little disjointed, and it can be a bit to navigate all of these different services. So that was really the impetus of HEART, which is the Holistic Elder Abuse Response Team. Is we wanted to create this program where that was really responding to that kind of situation, and we're trying to provide as many services we can in-house, in one place. So in the HEART program, if somebody wants a restraining order, we'll help them with every step of that process. We'll help them fill out the paperwork. We'll bring it to court for them on their behalf. We'll coordinate transportation. We'll go to the hearing with them, pay for the Uber, ride with them in the Uber. We'll be there with them at the hearing to provide that support. If there's anything that needs to be worked out after the restraining order is approved, we'll help them with that process. We'll also provide therapy, counseling. There's no cost to it if you're a HEART client. We don't need insurance. We want to make it very low barrier. So if that's something you're interested in, we can provide that. We facilitate 2 support groups that meet virtually. One is for victims of fraud, and the second one is for older adults that are experiencing abuse from their adult child or grandchild. And we created that particular group in response to seeing that common dynamic. There might be some cases where there's one HEART advocate that is helping with the restraining order, and a second HEART advocate that's helping with, that's providing the therapy. There's a few other things we offer in the program. We have our emergency fund, so we can help with some of the security needs. We can help. Sometimes people don't have a cell phone, and we want to make sure they have a cell phone so they can call 911, and we can pay for this. We can give them a cell phone, and we can pay for a few months of that service. So we have that as well. We're commonly paying for like new doors and broken windows, those things that might come up related to the abusive situation. The limitation to HEART is around geography. So we're focused on the greater Long Beach area, and we provide our services for that particular program in the South Bay, the Harbor area, South LA, and the southeast parts of LA County and Long Beach.
So there's some limitations. I was going to say that we should put your phone number out, but unless you're in those areas, you can't access those services.
There's some services in that program are county-wide, like our support groups. Mm-hmm. So our fraud support group, we've had it since 2016, And we've seen people really benefit from having that support from people that understand the experience and that have gone through similar experiences. And that's available for anyone in the county, as well as the other support group for older adults that are being abused by an adult child.
So we have a few more minutes left, about 15, and I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions. And you just brought up scams, and I have someone from Keck Medical School who is conducting a study about victims of financial fraud and scams. We have the flyers here so people can come and pick them up, or they can call and we can give you the number. But I will say this, financial abuse is really rampant, and scams are really rampant. And so you really do need to be careful when you give out your identification or tell people anything about you. Do you want to say, before we take questions, a little bit about scams and how people can safeguard themselves from scams and financial abuse?
Sure. I'm happy to come back here or really anywhere in the county to do a longer talk on scams. I think one thing that I want to share before it slips my mind, it's a really incredible resource, is the National Elder Fraud Hotline. It's really it's a new resource that just launched about a year or two ago, and you can call it Monday through Friday. I think it's open from 7 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. and you get connected to an actual person almost immediately. And we have all these moments where we're getting these emails and text messages, and they look so authentic and real. And it's so hard to differentiate between a real, like legit communication and a scam communication. So you can call this elder fraud hotline, and you can consult about it with the person that answers the phone, and ask them those questions. Now let's say that you slipped and you realized, uh-oh, I sent some money, I bought some gift cards and lost some money. What should I do next? You can call this hotline and they'll come up with a very specific plan of action based on what happened. Same thing if you shared some identity information like a social security number. What do I do about that? And they can help figure those questions out. As far as these email, text message scams, which are just so common, where I think we're unfortunately at the place right now where there's just so much of this activity that my recommendation is to assume any kind of email that's coming from someone claiming to be a business is a scam, because they use the same font, the same logo, the same kind of messaging as the actual company would use, whether it's Amazon or Chase, any kind of big company that you do business with. And it is hard to distinguish. So starting off by assuming it's a scam, and then going from there.
Well, I just want to thank you today, and this is, elder abuse is such a big problem in our community, and our goal today was to help people identify it and know how to report it. Either of us are available to help if you have questions, but I wanted to take questions now from the audience, and I don't know if we have any in the chat. Okay. Do we have any in the audience? Yes. We do have one, so I don't know how we're gonna.
Speak very loud.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
If I come across a neighbor in my neighborhood, and I observe that they look unkempt and it appears from the yard, it's messy, and I approach them and say, how you doing? I'm doing great. And they tell me, well, you need any help in any way from any agency or something? I'm doing fine, don't need any help. But I suspect
Sure, yeah. So to repeat the question, it's a great question. The question is, if I observe, let's say, a neighbor, and it seems like it appears that they're not caring for themselves, and the property's not being cared for. So there's this suspicion that there might be some self-neglect occurring. But when I actually engage with the neighbor and I ask them, are you okay? Do you need any help? And they're saying, no, everything's fine. Does that relieve me of my responsibility to report the abuse? I'll start off by saying it depends. So if you're a mandated reporter, if you have reasonable belief that elder abuse may be occurring, then you're mandated to report. If you're not a mandated reporter, or if you're not in the role of being a mandated reporter in that moment, then it's not required. So there's not that same kind of mandate. Now you can still report anyway, and if you're not a mandated reporter, and I'm glad you're asking this because it also brings up another really important part of this discussion, is that you can report anonymously. So you don't have to share your name. You're just a concerned community member, and want to make sure that if there might be anything available for this person, that they're being offered those services. And you don't know, there might be, we see sometimes with hoarding situations that there's specific funding, there's specific services for an agency to go in and maybe do like a one-time cleanup for the year, or twice a year, do this cleanup if the person's open to it. So the social worker that gets assigned to that case is going to be more familiar with those possibilities. Thank you.
So let me say this. Sometimes we get really busy and we don't reach out to neighbors, or we don't reach out to our older adults in our family. And I encourage everyone, every time I give a talk, I say, reach out to Aunt so-and-so, or your mom, or your dad, or your uncle, and just get to know them. We have a telephone reassurance program here at the Senior Center, and we call people 5 days a week. And we know when something's going on with them. And I think if you can keep in touch with your loved ones, if as a neighbor you can take on the responsibility of just asking them how they're doing, and sometimes you can tell from day to day that they're not doing as well as they had done before. So I encourage everyone to really reach out to the older adults in your family and in your community. I think we have a message in the chat bar.
There's a question about the resources on the Senior Center website for these issues. And will this video be posted?
Well, I'm glad you said something about this video. We have a video. We partnered with Public Health, Pasadena Public Health, and we put together a video, and it is on our website, and it does give a lot of information. It gives numbers, and it gives statistics, and we are going to update and put some more information on our website. So thank you so much for that question. Hold on one second.
I know several instances where our seniors who are very isolated, no family, etc., and they do need help. These people could use a social worker accomplice. How do we contact such a person, and is there a cost?
Thank you, Tom. So the question is, we encounter a lot of people that are isolated, and it seems like they could use some more support from like a social worker or somebody that might be able to support the person. Again, I think a really great place to start is with adult protective services, and I think this is a recommendation I'm making more and more often, where if there's a context to Tom's question that he has some familiarity with some of these situations, right? So I think that a helpful strategy when you're reporting something to adult protective services, if you have the opportunity, and there is a way to report if you're mandated to report it online and paper, is in addition to the observation, maybe some recommendations Because in the question, there's a suggestion that there might be something that might benefit that person. So I really think that this person would benefit from these things, and if there's anything you can say to kind of support that, that gives the person responding, it kind of it triggers that idea for them to think about that, because it's I want to acknowledge how hard of a job it is that the APS workers have to respond to these cases. They are complicated, and they can be stressful, and there can be a lot in one day, and to think of all of these factors at once can be overwhelming. And so to have something there that's like, okay, yeah, let me think about that and make sure that that's part of this plan of action, is to see if there's any of these kinds of resources available.
So I just want to follow that up real quick with a personal example, and I'll try to go real fast. I knew my mom had Alzheimer's, and she really needed help. And I work here with seniors every day. I have a lot of resources. And I said, can I get somebody to come in the house? No. Can I get somebody to clean the house? No. She lived in Monterey. No, no, no. I don't want anyone to come in my house. I don't need your help. I'm fine. Leave me alone. Now, we were lucky that we had a living trust. And when it got to a point that we realized that she could not take care of herself, we had 2 doctors that examined her and gave her a mini mental status test. Out of 36 questions, she got 2 right. She didn't know where she was born, her address, the state, the first African American president in the United States. I mean, she didn't know any of this. And so it's because I had a trust that I could go in and really help her. If I didn't have a trust, there was nothing that I could do. And so I say this to you because a lot of people said, well, the social worker came out, well, Adult Protective Services came out, and they didn't do anything. Their hands are tied if the person says they don't want help. And that's why I give that example, because my hands were tied for a long time, even though I knew my mom could benefit and have a healthier life if she would allow me to come in and help, and she wouldn't. So there was nothing that I could do. Is there another question? Yes.
Yes, so one of our Zoom audience is a Goodwill ambassador for elder care in the UK, James Cullen. And he asks, what programs exist in Pasadena to engage residential nursing or care managers in ensuring caring cultures such as predictive abuse ratio?
So I want to make sure that I fully understand the question, but when I think of residential care, I think that might mean at a facility.
Nursing
At a
home.
nursing home, right? Okay. So just to clarify that. So the ombudsman program would be the primary resource to respond to issues that are coming up in those care facilities. And there are some very specific laws that govern facilities and the level of care and the standard of care that they need to provide. The ombudsman is kind of that first response when those standards are being met. And then, if it can't be resolved with the ombudsman, there is a process for elevation where it might go to the county, to the Department of Public Health. It might go to California Care Licensing. So these are more regulatory agencies that are going to step in, and they might need to fine or to just to elevate the process in terms of making sure that the facility is holding up to the required standards.
I think we have time for one more question. Is there another question? Well, if there's not, I want to, we've talked a lot about Adult Protective Services, and I want to give a couple of numbers. So grab a pen, and if you don't have one, you can call, and I'll have the number on the front desk. So the Elder Abuse Hotline is 877-477-5555. 3646, or you can call 800-992-1660 to report any allegations of elder abuse.
It's also our resource guide.
Yes, so we have a resource guide here at the Senior Center, and those numbers are posted. I just want to thank you all for joining us today. I feel grateful that you are here to help us understand more about elder abuse. It is a sad, sad story, and believe me, at the Senior Center, we've heard plenty of them, and I know you have too, but we have to reach out to our older adults and help them live, age well, and live happy, productive lives. So thank you for being